They thought I wouldn't notice. Karen from the HOA rolled in produce trucks into my orchard without asking, without warning, like she owned the place. They crushed my trees, stole my fruit, and told the neighborhood it was community land. But what they didn't know, I had deeds cameras and the law on my side. So when I locked the gates behind them and welded them shut, they panicked. And that's when everything unraveled. Stick around, because what started as trespassing turned into a lawsuit, a courtroom twist, and the fall of an entire HOA empire. This isn't just about land. It's about standing your ground. It was the kind of morning I lived for: cool air, brushing through the citrus trees, dew still clinging to the grass, and birdsong weaving through the hush of dawn. That orchard wasn't just land to me. It was legacy. I bought it with my late wife 20 years ago after retiring from the Army. She always dreamed of a peaceful place to grow oranges, lemons, and apples, something we could tend together. When cancer took her, the orchard became my cathedral. So when I walked down the path behind my barn that morning and saw 2 box trucks parked square in the middle of my Grove engines, idling tailgates, open tire tracks, gouging across my root rows, I didn't feel confusion. I felt a jolt of cold fury. I froze for a moment, heart hammering against my ribs. The trucks were plain white, the kind that could belong to any delivery company, but magnetic signs on the driver's side doors read in cheap vinyl letters: HOA Community Market Initiative, in partnership with our neighborhood growers. What a damn lie. I was not their partner. I had never signed any agreement, never received a request, never even been told they were planning to drive trucks across my land. This was private property, gated, posted, fenced on every side. The only way in was the South Service entrance, and I knew exactly who had a master key to that gate: Karen Delaney, president of the HOA. I stormed toward the first truck, boots crunching over crushed leaves and torn soil. A sprinkler line had been ripped clean in two. 2 men stood at the open rear doors. One wore gloves. The other was already unloading crates: my oranges, my apples, my lemons. "Hey," I barked. They spun like deer in headlights. The younger one, early 20s, scanned me for a badge or a gun. The older one, sun-leathered, tried to look casual. "You guys lost?" I asked, voice low and tight. The older man waved vaguely at the trees. "This is for the HOA market. We were told this was community farmland." "You were told wrong," I said, stepping closer. "This is my orchard, my land. You're trespassing." He blinked. Karen said, "Karen doesn't own a single inch of this orchard." At that moment, the second truck rolled forward a few feet. Its rear tire crushed a freshly grafted sapling I'd planted last season. I heard the young branches snap like bones. My fists clenched so hard my knuckles went white. "I want you off my land," I said. "Now. Tell whoever sent you they'll be dealing with a lawsuit if this happens again." The younger guy whispered something to the older one. They climbed back into the cabs without another word. No apology. Engines revved, tires spun mud across my roots, and they disappeared down the back access road. I stood there long after the dust settled, staring at the broken sapling, the tire ruts, the trail of leaves. Something inside me snapped. I knew Karen. I knew how she operated. This wasn't a mistake. It was calculated. She'd been nipping at my land for years. Complaints about my fencing demands I share produce a few months ago a request to donate space for a pop-up market. I said no. She smiled that tight, poisonous smile and muttered I wasn't very neighborly. Now I understood what she really meant. She was going to take what I wouldn't give. I walked back to the house, blood roaring in my ears. At the old Cedar South gate, I checked the padlock. It hung unlatched. My master lock, which I kept secured 24/7, had been opened with a key. Karen had once demanded master key access for emergencies. I refused. So the HOA had made copies behind my back. I took photos of everything: tire tracks, crushed irrigation, the broken sapling, the tampered lock. Then I went inside, sat at the kitchen table, and opened the drawer where I kept the old spiral notebook. Inside was the single sheet I'd pulled from county archives years ago: my land deed, clearly marked, clearly surveyed, clearly notarized, parcel 1092C, sole owner Michael J. Wheeler. I stared at it and made a decision I hadn't made in a very long time. I was going to fight. Not with words or fruit baskets. This was war, quiet, legal, and devastating. Because the next time Karen's trucks rolled onto my land, I wouldn't just be waiting with words. I didn't wait long to confront her. 2 days later was the next HOA board meeting held in the clubhouse beside the golf course. I made sure I was the first person through the door. The room smelled of fake orchids and desperation. Motivational posters about community harmony stared down like bad jokes. Same posters that had watched them fine Mrs. Alvarez for painting her shutters the wrong shade of blue. Karen Delaney sat at the head of the table, like she'd been born there, pink blazer, pressed to a razor's edge, pearls gleaming hair shellacked so perfectly it looked like a helmet. When I walked in, her eyes flicked up. For half a heartbeat, I saw it a flash of genuine alarm. Then the syrupy smile slid back into place. "Well, Mr. Wheeler," she said, voice dripping honey over broken glass. "What brings you to the board today?" I didn't sit. I dropped a thick manila folder in the center of the table. It landed with a satisfying thud. Inside were time-stamped, geotagged photographs. Her HOA logo trucks parked in my grove, crushed saplings, severed irrigation lines, the unlatched south gate. "You want to explain why your people drove 2 box trucks across my orchard without permission?" I asked, loud enough for every board member to hear. Sam Whitley, the vice president, nearly dropped his pen. Dana, the treasurer, shifted in her seat. Karen kept smiling. "I have no idea what you're talking about," she said, calm as Sunday brunch. I tapped the photos, these trucks. "Your magnetic signs, my trees, my soil, my broken pipes, my stolen fruit." She flipped through the pictures like they were grocery coupons. "Those trucks don't belong to the HOA. Anyone can buy a magnet sign, Mr. Wheeler." My jaw locked so tight I felt it creak. "You're going to sit there and pretend this wasn't you?" I asked. "That your people didn't use a copied key to open my gate?" Karen gave a soft, theatrical laugh. "If someone trespassed on your property, that's unfortunate. But the HOA has no record of authorizing any market activity on your land." I turned to the rest of the table. "You all see these photos? This is private property. I have the deed. They treated it like a parking lot." Sam opened his mouth, closed it again. Dana stared at her notepad. Nobody spoke. They were all terrified of her. I laid my hands flat on the table. "Let me make this crystal clear for the record. If any HOA vehicle or contractor sets foot on my property again, I will call the sheriff, file criminal trespass charges, and pursue every dollar of civil damages the law allows." Karen's smile thinned to a blade. "You're welcome to take whatever steps you feel necessary," she said, ice under the sugar. "But let's not create unnecessary drama, shall we?" Unnecessary drama, her favorite phrase. She'd used it on Greg when she tried to make him take down his flagpole because it was too tall for neighborhood cohesion. Greg's a Marine. That pole was the only thing keeping him steady some nights. I gathered my folder and walked to the door. "Oh, Mr. Wheeler," Karen called sweet as antifreeze. "One more thing. Your south gate technically intersects an HOA easement. You may want to verify that before throwing around accusations." I stopped dead. That gate was not on HOA land. I had it surveyed myself. But she was planting seeds, laying the first brick in whatever new lie she was building. I left the clubhouse with my pulse roaring in my ears. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was strategy. Karen was testing every boundary, legal and otherwise, waiting to see how far she could push before I broke. When I got home, I did 2 things. First, I called John Teague, old Army buddy, former logistics officer, now a property rights attorney, who eats HOAs for breakfast. I told him everything. He said, "Send me the photos and the deed. I'm in." Second, I ordered motion-activated night vision 4K trail cameras, 8 of them. I wanted high-definition proof next time they came. That night, I walked the entire perimeter with a flashlight and a pipe wrench. Scout padded beside me, hackles half raised. At the south gate, he growled low. I swept the beam across the grass just inside the fence line. There, half hidden in the weeds, was a freshly placed laminated flyer. "Support local fresh fruit from right here in the community location, community green lot number 2 access via South Road entrance." My orchard had been lot number 2 on a plat map 20 years out of date. The HOA had relinquished all claim to it in 2008. But they were waving that obsolete map like it was the 10 Commandments. They were building a paper trail, a false history, so that when I finally pushed back, they could point and say, "See, he's the unreasonable one." I stood there in the dark moonlight silver on the leaves and felt the orchard breathing around me, every tree my wife and I had planted, every root we'd coaxed through drought and frost. This wasn't just land. This was the last place on earth that still had her fingerprints on it. And no clipboard-wielding tyrant in a pink blazer was going to steal it from me. 2 days after the board meeting, an envelope appeared in my mailbox. No stamp. Hand-delivered. HOA seal, glaring like a dare. The label read, "Community Zoning Clarification for your records." I opened it on the porch already knowing it wouldn't be friendly. Inside was a grainy photocopy of a plat map so old the ink had faded to ghosts. There, in the exact spot where my orchard now stood, someone had circled in red, "Lot number 2, Reserved Community Agricultural Zone." Below it, a typed letter on HOA letterhead. "Dear Mr. Wheeler, please be advised that according to the original community zoning plan, Lot number 2 is listed as a shared-use agricultural space intended for community enrichment and support. While the HOA appreciates your stewardship of this space, we respectfully request that you cooperate with our community market program to ensure equitable access for all residents. Warm regards, Karen Delaney, HOA President." No legal citation, no county record number, just a 20-year-old map and a demand wearing a smiley face mask. It was the bureaucratic equivalent of someone kicking in your front door, raiding your fridge, and leaving a post-it that says, "Thanks for sharing." I marched inside, yanked my own file from the cabinet, and laid my deed on the table beside her photocopy. The difference was night and day. Parcel 1092C. Private agricultural property, sole ownership, Michael J. Wheeler, recorded March 14, 2008. HOA relinquishment of all claims. Board Resolution 08117 signed and notarized. I scanned Karen's letter, attached every document that proved her map was ancient history, and fired the whole package to John Teague with a one-line email. "They're escalating, claiming my land is shared use with a map older than most of their homeowners. Next move." His reply came in under an hour. "They're trying to set up adverse possession or prescriptive easement arguments. Classic HOA playbook. Keep documenting everything. Do not let them establish regular use. I'm drafting the cease and desist tonight, and Mike, do not give them one more inch." I knew he was right. Karen wasn't going to file anything herself. She was going to let community use pile up until a judge might one day say, "Well, it's been happening for years." She wanted me painted as the selfish old man blocking progress. The very next morning, I spotted them again. From my porch, I watched through binoculars as 2 volunteers in matching green HOA polos walked the fence line, pointing, measuring, snapping photos with an iPad. One carried a clipboard thick with sketches. I didn't confront them. I just let the new barn roof camera record every second in glorious 4K. Scout growled low beside me, reading my mood. That afternoon, my inbox pinged with the friendliest little ambush you've ever seen. Subject: community, involvement, opportunity, orchard, support, shift, sign up. A Google form. Shifts starting at 6 a.m. Help harvest and transport fresh produce for our neighbors in need. Location: community green lot number 2. They weren't just claiming the land now. They were recruiting volunteers to work it. I replied to the entire mailing list. Any further unauthorized entry onto parcel 1092C will be met with immediate law enforcement response. This is private property. Cease all activity immediately. Future communications will be handled through legal counsel. Michael J. Wheeler. Then I called the county recorder's office myself. After 3 transfers and a very patient clerk, I got confirmation in plain English. "Mr. Wheeler, you are the sole owner of record. The HOA signed away any claim in 2008. There is 0 active easement or shared use designation. I'm emailing you certified copies right now." I printed them, laminated them, and hung 1 copy on the south gate like a wanted poster. The next morning, just before sunrise, I heard the now familiar rumble. I slipped out in boots and pajama pants, phone already recording. A single produce truck crept down the service road headlights, off rolling slow like a burglar. It stopped right in the heart of my Valencia row. 3 men hopped out and began setting up folding tables and a pop-up canopy between my trees. They were staging fruit that wasn't even mine this time, just using my land as their farmer's market backdrop. I dialed the non-emergency line first, gave them the short version, then called John. By the time the first deputy rolled up, the workers were frozen mid-unload, staring at a 68-year-old man in flannel pants holding a laminated deed like it was the 10 Commandments. I walked forward calmly. "Morning, Deputy. These gentlemen are on private property in violation of previous warnings. I have video deed police reports from last week and a cease and desist that was delivered yesterday." The deputy took my folder, flipped through it, then looked at the workers. "Pack it up. You're leaving now." One of them tried the old line, Karen said it was fine. Karen's not the county recorder, the deputy cut in. Move! I watched them fold their canopy reload crates and roll out with their tails between their legs. As the dust settled, I looked at the new ruts, the disconnected irrigation hoses, snaking across the dirt, the trash they'd already dropped. I didn't feel triumph. I felt the siege tightening. Because I knew Karen wouldn't stop, she'd just get sneakier. And I was done asking nicely. The trucks kept coming. Every morning at 6 a.m., sharp like clockwork, a new vehicle would nose through the south gate. Sometimes a box truck, sometimes a flatbed, once even a refrigerated van, with a different fake magnet slapped on the side. New drivers, new faces, but always the same lie. Karen said it was cleared with the board. They grew bolder. They stopped pretending to be quiet. They left deeper scars. Monday, sprinkler heads ripped clean off, water geysering into the air until I could shut the valves. Tuesday, an entire row of mature lemon branches sheared off by a careless reverse maneuver. Wednesday, my beehive box home. Two thriving colonies I'd installed for pollination toppled and smashed. Bees scattered in panicked clouds, wax melting in the sun like spilled gold. Each time I documented everything, photos, video, GPS timestamps, damage estimates. Each time I called the sheriff's non-emergency line and watched deputies arrive after the trucks had already vanished in a cloud of dust. It was death by 1,000 cuts, HOA style. At night, I barely slept. Scout paced the hallway, ears twitching at every distant engine sound. I added more floodlights, more cameras, even chained a secondary interior gate so they'd have to breach 2 barriers instead of 1. But the worst part wasn't the physical damage. It was the silence from the rest of the board. Not one email, not one phone call, not one, "Hey Mike, what the hell is going on?" They had either been terrified into submission or had swallowed Karen's narrative whole, that I was the cranky recluse hoarding community land, that I was the problem. Then, on Friday morning, I found the message they'd been building toward. Someone had spray painted the side of my barn in dripping red letters 3 feet tall. Hoarder of the harvest. I stood there in the dawn light, coffee going cold in my hand, rage boiling so hot I could taste metal. It wasn't random vandalism. It was psychological warfare. A public shaming designed to turn the neighborhood against me before I could turn them against her. 2 can play that game. That same night, under the cover of darkness, I printed blown-up copies of every piece of proof I owned. The certified deed, the 2008 HOA relinquishment resolution, the cease and desist order, before and after photos of the destruction, stills from the trail cameras showing their trucks. I stapled them in a long continuous banner across the exact same stretch of barn fencing where they'd left their accusation. Then in thick black Sharpie, I wrote underneath, "This land is privately owned, parcel 192C, Michael J. Wheeler, sole owner. Since 2008, trespassers will be prosecuted, all incidents recorded. You want fresh produce, go plant your own damn trees." I stepped back and surveyed my work under the floodlights. It wasn't pretty, but neither was war. The next morning, Saturday, I woke before the sun, a length of heavy-gauge chain in one hand, and a brand-new, high-security padlock in the other. In the workshop, the portable welder was already warmed up. I knew they were coming again. I could feel it in the air, the way you feel a storm front moving in. At 5:53 a.m., the growl of diesel engines drifted across the valley. 2 trucks this time, 1 box, 1 flatbed loaded with plastic crates. They killed their headlights 50 yards out and coasted through the open south gate like they owned the place. They rolled deeper than ever before parking between my oldest rows of Valencia oranges. Tires sank into soil I'd nurtured for 18 years. 2 men hopped out, laughing, already unloading tables and banners. I gave them 10 minutes. Let them commit fully. Then I moved. I walked straight to the south gate, wide open and mocking, slid it closed with a hollow metallic scream, threaded the thick chain through the rails 3 times, snapped the padlock shut, and fired up the welder. Blue-white flame hissed to life. Sparks showered like angry fireflies. 30 seconds later, the chain was fused into a solid steel loop no bolt cutter on earth was going to touch. The gate was no longer an entrance. It was a cage. I killed the welder, flipped up my mask, and strolled back to where the 2 workers had just finished setting up their little market stall between my trees. The younger one noticed me first. "Hey, old man, what the hell are you doing?" I held up my phone, red record light glowing. "You're trespassing. Again. I have every second on camera." The older one dropped a crate of someone else's strawberries and started toward me. "You can't lock us in here." I just did, I said, pointing toward the gate, still glowing cherry red from the weld. Feel free to try it. They sprinted to the gate, yanked, pushed, kicked, swore. The chain didn't even rattle. The younger one fumbled for his phone. I'm calling Karen right now. Perfect, I said, already dialing on speaker. I'm calling the sheriff. The dispatcher recognized my voice immediately. Mr. Wheeler, deputies are en route. ETA 6 minutes. Stay calm and do not engage. 4 minutes later, 2 county SUVs came tearing down the service road, lights flashing, but no sirens, small favors. Karen's white BMW arrived 30 seconds behind them, screeching to a halt in a cloud of gravel dust. She exploded out of the driver's seat, in full Saturday battle armor, pink blazer, clipboard pearls, rattling like war drums. This is false imprisonment, she shrieked, marching toward me. You welded my workers inside private property. No, Karen, I said, calm as sunrise. I welded trespassers inside my private property after they ignored every warning, every police report, and a court-ordered cease and desist. One of the deputies, the same one from 2 weeks ago, took my fresh stack of documentation, flipped through it, and turned to the workers. Gentlemen, you're free to walk out anytime you like. The trucks, however, are staying until this is sorted legally. Karen's face went the color of her blazer. You can't confiscate HOA property. Ma'am, the deputy said there is no HOA property here. County records are crystal clear. You've been told this repeatedly. A small crowd of neighbors had already gathered along the fence line, phones up, filming the whole spectacle. Karen saw them, saw her carefully curated image cracking in real time. She opened her mouth, closed it, then hissed under her breath, "This isn't over, Wheeler." I smiled for the first time in weeks. Yes, Karen, it is. The deputies escorted the 2 workers out on foot. They left the trucks exactly where they sat, keys still in the ignitions crates, half unloaded. One deputy paused on his way out. Nice welding, he said with a grin. Incident reports getting filed as we speak. This one's going to stick. As the last cruiser pulled away, I stood alone, in the middle of my orchard, morning sun climbing the sky, Scout sitting proudly at my side. The trucks sat trapped like monuments to overreach. For the first time since this started, the ground beneath my feet felt steady again. The tide had turned. I thought Saturday's cage would finally make them back off. I was wrong. Sunday morning, before the coffee had even finished brewing, tires crunched on my front driveway, not the service road this time. A single county patrol car rolled to a stop, followed immediately by Karen's gleaming white BMW, so clean it looked like it had been waxed at dawn. She stepped out in full war paint, pink blazer buttoned to the throat, clipboard clutched like a shield, pearls flashing in the early light. The officer, mid-40s, badge polished, walked up first. Morning, Mr. Wheeler. Got a complaint here from Ms. Delaney. Says you unlawfully detained vehicles yesterday and damaged HOA property by welding the gate shut. Karen folded her arms, lips pressed into that razor-thin smile. He trapped my workers, officer. False imprisonment. Destruction of property. This has gone too far. I stepped off the porch in my slippers, Scout at my heels. Morning, deputy, I said, calm as Sunday itself. Would you like to see the documentation before we continue this conversation? He glanced at Karen, then back at me. Yes, sir. I would. I disappeared inside for 15 seconds and returned with the accordion folder I now kept beside the front door like a loaded rifle. I handed him in order. 1. The certified 2008 deed and HOA relinquishment resolution. 2. The court-stamped cease and desist delivered last week. 3. Yesterday's incident report, already on file with his own department. 4. A USB drive containing 4K footage from 4 different angles showing the trucks entering of their own free will unloading and then discovering the welded gate. The deputy scrolled through the still frames on his phone, eyebrows climbing higher with every swipe. Karen started talking over him. He can't just weld people inside private property. Ma'am, the deputy said without looking up, this isn't your property. County records confirm sole ownership by Mr. Wheeler since 2008. You've been advised of this multiple times. She switched tactics instantly. Then he damaged HOA assets. Those trucks are rented under the Community Market Initiative. I opened the folder to the rental agreements I'd photographed yesterday, driver's licenses, visible company name, clearly not the HOA. Actually, I said they're rented under Delaney Consulting LLC. Funny how that works. Karen's mouth opened, closed, opened again. Nothing came out. The deputy handed the folder back to me. Sir, you were within your rights to secure your own gate after repeated trespass. No laws were broken here. Complaint is unfounded. He turned to Karen. Ma'am, I'm going to say this once more on the record. Cease all activity on this parcel. Next call out will not end with a friendly chat. For the first time, I saw the mask slip completely. Her eyes went wide, cheeks blotched red under the makeup. She looked suddenly small inside that pink blazer. You're taking his side, she hissed. No, ma'am, the deputy said, already walking back to his cruiser. I'm taking the side of the county deed registry. The patrol car rolled away. Karen stood there a moment longer, clutching her clipboard so hard the plastic cracked. Then she spun on her heel, slammed her car door hard enough to rattle the windows and peeled out, leaving twin streaks of rubber on my asphalt. Scout barked once at the retreating BMW tail wagging like we'd just won the Super Bowl. That afternoon, the HOA website posted a short sour notice. Due to unforeseen legal conflicts, the community market program is temporarily suspended until further notice. No apology, no explanation, just the digital equivalent of a slammed door. By Monday morning, 3 neighbors had already knocked on my door. First was Mrs. Alvarez, with a warm peach pie and tears in her eyes. Second was Greg the Marine carrying a 6-pack and a quiet Semper Fi brother. Third was Dana the treasurer, who'd always sat silent at meetings, clutching a thumb drive. I have emails, she whispered. Lots of them. Karen rerouted money, lied about votes, threatened people. If you need them for court, they're yours. I took the drive, shook her hand, and for the first time in weeks felt something lighter than rage. Hope maybe. That night I walked the orchard under a thin moon. No engines, no headlights creeping along the fence line. Just wind in the leaves and Scout's steady breathing beside me. Silence, the good kind. But I knew better than to celebrate yet. Karen had been cornered, not killed. And cornered animals bite hardest. By Tuesday morning, I was done playing defense. I called John Teague at 7:02 a.m. Time to go on the offensive, I said. He laughed, like a man who'd been waiting years for this exact sentence. We met at his office at 9. No glass towers, just a low brick building with an American flag in a triangular case on the shelf and a coffee pot that had probably served in Desert Storm. I dumped everything on his desk, 5 months of photos, videos, damage estimates, sheriff reports, the welded gate incident. Dana's thumb drive, the certified deed, the 2008 relinquishment resolution, and the laminated cease and desist that had become my personal scripture. John flipped through it all without speaking, the way a sniper checks windage. When he finally looked up, his grin was wolfish. Mike, this isn't just a trespass case anymore. This is a pattern of intentional misconduct, property destruction, misuse of HOA funds, and civil conspiracy. We're not asking for an apology. We're going to make them bleed money and reputation until they beg to settle. He spent the rest of the day drafting the complaint. I sat beside him reading every line. The lawsuit had 4 counts. 1. Repeated criminal trespass after formal notice. 2. Destruction of property, 18,412 in undocumented damages. Irrigation trees, beehives, lost pollination yield. 3. Violation of court-ordered cease and desist. 4. Intentional infliction of emotional distress. The graffiti. The smear campaign, the nightly siege. We requested full compensatory damages, punitive damages, attorney fees, and a permanent injunction barring the HOA and any of its agents from ever setting foot on Parcel 1092C again. By Thursday afternoon, the complaint was filed in county court. Karen was served the following Tuesday at the regularly scheduled HOA board meeting in front of every resident who bothered to show up. The process server walked straight down the center aisle, envelope in hand. Karen Marie Delaney. She stood up slowly, pink blazer, crisp as ever. You have been served. He placed the papers in her manicured hand and walked out. You could have heard a pin drop on carpet. The next morning, my phone started blowing up. Did you actually sue the HOA? Is it true she spent $9 grand of our dues on this market thing? I always knew she was shady, but damn. Dana's emails had started circulating. Sam Whitley sent me a private message, if you need me to testify, I'm in. That same week, I started getting visitors I never expected. Greg brought his kids to see the orchard and let them pick a sack of oranges. Mrs. Velasquez showed up with homemade tamales and cried while hugging me, saying I'd given the whole neighborhood permission to breathe again. Even the Martin kids left a chalk drawing on my driveway, Scout sitting under a lemon tree, with a little stick figure me holding a welding torch like Excalibur. No one fined them for it. But the quiet didn't last. Karen's next move was classic wounded tyrant retaliation by paperwork. A thick envelope arrived, certified mail, addressed to Michael Wheeler, non-compliant resident. Inside a 5-page notice of violation citing unauthorized signage, my legal warnings on my own fence, use of hazardous materials without permit, welding my own gate, unpermitted agricultural structures, the orchard I planted before she moved in, general disruption of community cohesion. Total fine $5,000 payable in 10 days or daily penalties would accrue. I laughed so hard, Scout thought we were playing and brought me his rope toy. 2 days later, the HOA newsletter went out digital and printed warning of a certain resident who had weaponized the legal system against his own neighbors, jeopardized beloved community programs, and was driving up everyone's dues with frivolous litigation. They never used my name, but the message was clear. Some neighbors went cold again. One woman literally crossed the street when she saw me walking Scout. I didn't care, because John had just received the first batch of subpoenaed HOA emails, and Christmas came early. Karen personally contracting with a produce distributor promising low-cost access to surplus orchard land without board vote. Emails where she told workers the owner is on board when I very much was not. Sam Whitley warning her in writing that she was exposing the HOA to massive liability. She never replied. And the crown jewel $9,400 in dues quietly rerouted to community outreach logistics with 0 itemized receipts. We printed everything in color, highlighted the juiciest parts, and prepared for the next general meeting. Because Karen had scheduled an emergency community information session titled The Future of Orchard Land Use. Translation: a last-ditch propaganda rally. She wanted the room packed with residents who still believed her version of reality. I wanted the room packed too, but I wasn't bringing fruit baskets. I was bringing receipts. The clubhouse was packed that Sunday afternoon, standing room only hotter than a tin roof in July. Ceiling fans spun lazily, doing nothing against the tension. Everyone still in their church clothes, clutching paper fans and bottled water, waiting for the show. Karen stood at the podium, glowing under the fluorescent lights. Fresh pink blazer pearls, shining like armor, smile dialed to maximum wattage. Behind her, a PowerPoint slide blared in Comic Sans. The future of orchard land used, turning underutilized space into community treasure. Translation: she was about to guilt-trip the entire room into voting my orchard into her personal fiefdom. I stood at the very back, arms crossed, John Teague beside me in his only suit, the one he wore to military funerals. Dana sat 3 rows from the front, thumb drive, clenched in her fist like a grenade. Sam Whitley looked ready to throw up. Karen launched into her speech the second the clock hit 3 huzzahs. For too long, she began, voice trembling with rehearsed emotion. A single resident has blocked the neighborhood from enjoying fresh local produce grown right here in our own community. This isn't about one person's trees. This is about all of us. About children who deserve healthy food. About seniors on fixed incomes. About the spirit of sharing that built this neighborhood. The slide changed to a photoshopped image of happy families picking oranges under a banner that read, "Our Orchard, Our Future." Half the room nodded along like dashboard bobbleheads. She was good. I'll give her that. Then she opened the floor for community feedback. I didn't wait for her to call on me. I simply started walking down the center aisle. Every head turned. The room went graveyard quiet. Karen's smile flickered. "Mr. Wheeler, if you have a comment, please wait to be." "Karen Marie Delaney," I said loud and clear, stopping 10 feet from the podium. "You have repeatedly trespassed on my private property, destroyed nearly $20,000 of agricultural assets, misused HOA funds, and lied to this entire room for months." I dropped the first stack color printouts of her own emails on the table in front of her with a heavy thud. Gasps rippled through the crowd. "These are the emails you thought no one would ever see," I continued. "Here's you promising a produce distributor free access to surplus orchard land that you do not own. Here's you telling workers I had given permission when I explicitly had not. And here, page 47, is the line where you moved $9,400 of our dues into a slush fund with 0 board approval." I passed thick packets down every row. People started flipping pages like they'd been handed the Dead Sea Scrolls. Dana stood up next, voice shaking but steady. "I'm the treasurer. There is no documentation for any of that money. No votes, no receipts, just Karen's signature." Sam Whitley rose too red-faced but resolute. I warned her in writing that this was illegal. She ignored me. She ignored all of us. Then it started a chain reaction. Mrs. Velasquez stood. She ripped out my rose garden and fined me $2,000 for unapproved plant species. Greg's deep voice boomed from the back. She tried to take my flagpole. Said it violated height restrictions. I'm a disabled veteran. That pole is the only thing flying higher than my pain some days. One by one they rose, people I barely knew, telling stories I'd only heard in whispers. The chalk art fines. The unauthorized tree removals. The secret budget increases. The threats behind closed doors. Karen gripped the podium so hard her knuckles went white. This is not the time or place, she started. John Teague stepped forward calm as a judge. Actually, ma'am, this is exactly the time and place. My client has filed suit against the HOA and against you personally for trespass property, destruction, fraud, and defamation. Discovery is going to be very unpleasant. Unless, of course, you'd like to resign right now and spare everyone the subpoenas. The room went dead silent. Karen looked out at the sea of faces, faces that used to fear her faces, that now looked back with pure contempt. Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. Sam Whitley moved first. I make a motion, he said, voice cracking, but clear, that we place President Delaney on immediate administrative leave and initiate a full independent audit of all HOA finances for the past 3 years. Seconded before he even finished the sentence. The vote wasn't close. It was unanimous. Karen stood frozen as the gavel, someone actually found a gavel, cracked like a gunshot. She gathered her purse, with shaking hands, walked down the aisle, without looking left or right, and disappeared through the double doors. The room erupted, some cheering, some crying, some just sitting there stunned that it was finally over. I didn't cheer. I just walked out into the late afternoon sun, took a deep breath that tasted like citrus and freedom, and headed home to my orchard. For the first time in months, the gates were closed, but the war was finally truly over. 6 weeks later, the courtroom smelled like old wood and fresh justice. Karen was no longer HOA president. She had resigned for health reasons the day after the clubhouse massacre, and her name had been scrubbed from every newsletter, every directory, every group photo on the community bulletin board, as if she'd never existed. But the lawsuit marched on. John and I sat on the plaintiff's side. Across the aisle was the HOA's new lawyer, a nervous young man in a silver tie who kept apologizing under his breath. Karen herself sat 2 rows behind him in a navy suit instead of her signature pink face drawn tight, staring straight ahead like she was watching her own funeral. The judge was a no-nonsense veteran with wire-rimmed glasses and zero patience for HOA fairy tales. He flipped through our exhibit binder, once raised an eyebrow, and got straight to it. Counsel for the defense, he said your client sent trucks workers and materials onto Mr. Wheeler's private property repeatedly, after written warnings, after police intervention, after a court-ordered cease and desist. How exactly is this a misunderstanding? The young lawyer cleared his throat 3 times. Your Honor, the HOA believed in good faith that historical zoning documents, historical, the judge cut in. The documents you're referring to are 23 years old. The current deed, the one signed and recorded in 2008, explicitly relinquishes all HOA claims. Are you telling me your client is incapable of reading a date? More throat clearing, no answer. The judge turned to John. Plaintiff's counsel relief sought. John stood. Full compensatory damages of $18,412 for documented destruction of irrigation systems, trees, and pollination assets. $12,000 in legal fees. Punitive damages in the amount of $50,000 for willful and repeated misconduct, and a permanent injunction barring the HOA and its agents from ever again entering, claiming, or interfering with Parcel 1092C. Then the judge did something I didn't expect. He looked directly at me. Mr. Wheeler, you may speak. I stood. The room was so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. This isn't about the money, Your Honor. I served 22 years in the Army so people could own a piece of land and not have it stolen by whoever has the shiniest clipboard. My late wife and I planted every tree on that orchard with our own hands. All I ever asked was to be left alone. They refused. So I'm here, asking the court to make that refusal permanent. I sat down. The judge didn't even look at the defense again. Judgment for the plaintiff in full. Compensatory damages awarded. Punitive damages awarded. Permanent injunction granted. The HOA will also issue a written apology to Mr. Wheeler and distribute it to every resident within 14 days. Case closed. The gavel fell like a thunderclap. John reached over and squeezed my shoulder so hard it hurt. Outside in the hallway, reporters from the local paper were already waiting neighbors too. Someone started clapping, then everyone did. I didn't smile for the cameras. I just shook John's hand, thanked the bailiff, and walked out into bright November sunlight that smelled like oranges carried on the wind. 2 days later, a letter arrived, HOA letterhead, new president's signature. Dear Mr. Wheeler, the Homeowners Association acknowledges the sole and exclusive legal ownership of Parcel 1092C by Michael J. Wheeler. We deeply regret the distress caused by prior actions taken without authority or justification. New safeguards have been implemented to prevent any similar incident in the future. Enclosed, please find a cashier's check in the amount of $80 for 12s representing full judgment. Sincerely, Samuel Whitley, Interim, HOA President. I left the check on the kitchen table for 3 weeks. Some days, I used it as a coaster. Some days, Scout slept on it. Eventually, I deposited it and bought new beehives, a bigger welder, and a granite bench under Evelyn's favorite lemon tree, engraved with her name. The neighbors changed overnight. Greg and his kids came by every Saturday to help prune. Mrs. Velasquez planted roses along my fence line, bright red ones, and dared anyone to fine her. The Martin children turned my driveway into a constantly evolving chalk mural, Scout the Orchard me, with a welding mask like some citrus-wielding superhero. No citations ever came. The trucks never returned. The south gate stayed welded shut for exactly 1 more month, then I cut the chain myself, not because I had to, but because I finally could. Because the boundary wasn't steel anymore. It was law. It was respect. It was mine. The orchard healed faster than I did. New saplings went in where tires had gouged the earth. The crushed sprinkler lines were replaced with heavier pipe. The bees came back first, curious scouts, buzzing around the new hives, then whole colonies roaring in like they'd never left. By the following spring, the lemon trees were heavy with fruit again, branches bent low like they were bowing in gratitude. But some mornings I still woke up at 4:57 a.m., heart racing, listening for diesel engines that never came. Old habits. One Saturday, in early May, I was out pruning the oldest Valencia when I heard footsteps on the gravel. I looked up half expecting trouble and saw Sam Whitley standing at the edge of the row hat, literally in his hands. Mike, he said, voice rough, I know you don't owe me the time of day, but I'd like to apologize. Face to face, man to man. I set the loppers down and walked over. Scout trotted up, sniffed Sam's shoes, and gave a single wag clearance, granted. Sam looked around at the rows of trees, the new growth, the quiet. I sat in those meetings and said nothing. He continued. I watched her twist bylaws, move money, threaten people, and I kept my mouth shut because it was easier. I was a coward. What you did in that clubhouse, what you did for all of us, I'll never forget it. He stuck out his hand. I shook it, hard. You're here now, I said. That counts. He nodded, eyes wet, and left without another word. Word spread, they started coming one by one. Dana brought a bottle of good bourbon and sat on my porch for 2 hours, telling me every dirty secret she'd kept quiet about for years. Mrs. Velasquez planted a rose bush right at the entrance to the South Road, deep red blooms with a little plaque that read, In memory of spines finally grown. Greg showed up in full dress blues one Sunday morning, saluted the orchard like it was Arlington, and left a folded flag in a shadow box on my doorstep. I hung it in the barn next to Evelyn's old gardening hat. The HOA itself changed too. Sam ran for president unopposed and won in a landslide. First order of business, every single rule Karen had ever weaponized was repealed or rewritten. Flagpoles, unlimited height. Rose gardens, plant whatever the hell you want. Chalk art, encouraged. Dues actually went down the next year. One afternoon, I found a handwritten letter slipped under my door. No signature, but I recognized the perfect cursive. I'm sorry, I was wrong. I thought control was the same as leadership. You taught me the difference the hard way. Thank you for not letting me destroy what you and your wife built. I hope one day you can forgive me. I never answered it. Some things don't need words. Summer came in hot and golden. The orchard hit peak harvest, more fruit than I could pick alone. So I did something I swore I'd never do. I opened the south gate. Not because anyone forced me. Not because I owed them. because I finally could without losing myself. I put a hand-painted sign on a sawhorse at the entrance. Free fruit, pick what you need, take only what you'll use. Leave the ladder for the next person. Scout is friendly, but will judge you if you waste. Within an hour, the first family showed up, young couple, 2 little kids with sticky fingers and wide eyes. They filled 2 grocery bags with oranges and left a thank you note and a plate of cookies. By evening, the driveway looked like a church picnic. Laughter drifted between the rows. Kids ran under the trees like they were in Eden. Old men told war stories while leaning on my fence. Someone started a grill. Someone else brought a guitar. I sat on the porch with Scout's head in my lap and a cold beer sweating in my hand, watching the sun sink behind the lemons in a blaze of orange fire. John Teague pulled up near dusk, still in his courthouse suit. "Thought I'd find you here," he said, handing me another beer. "Place looks like a damn Norman Rockwell painting." "Feels that way too," I admitted. He studied me for a long moment. "You know what you did right. You didn't just save your orchard. You reminded an entire neighborhood what freedom actually feels like." I took a slow drink and looked out at all of them, my neighbors, picking fruit under the same trees my wife and I had planted with love and blisters and hope. "Maybe," I said. "Or maybe I just got tired of locking the gate." John laughed and clinked his bottle against mine. "Either way, brother, you won." That night, after the last car rolled out and the moon rose silver over the rows, I walked the orchard alone. The air smelled like citrus and wood smoke, and something I hadn't smelled in years. Peace. I stopped under Evelyn's favorite lemon tree, the one we'd planted the week we found out she was sick, the one that somehow survived everything. I rested my hand on the trunk and spoke to the dark the way I used to speak to her. "We kept it, Eva," I whispered. "Every root, every leaf. It's still ours." The wind moved through the branches, soft as breath, and for just a second, I swear I felt her fingers lace through mine. The orchard answered back in 1,000 quiet voices. Yes, it always was. Seasons turned. The orchard grew older, stronger, more generous than I ever deserved. The new saplings I planted after the war shot up faster than the old wounds healed, and by the 3rd spring, the rows were so thick with fruit that the branches touched overhead like cathedral arches. I kept the south gate open every Saturday from May through October. The sign got repainted every year by whichever kid drew the short straw. Always the same words, always a little crooked, always perfect. "Free fruit, pick what you need, take only what you'll use. Leave the ladder for the next person. Scout is friendly mostly." Scout himself went gray around the muzzle, slower on the patrols, but he still made the rounds every dawn, tail high, making sure the world remembered whose orchard this was. People came from outside the neighborhood. Now word had spread on local Facebook groups about the old veteran who'd beaten the HOA and turned his victory into an open invitation. They brought pies, thank you cards, toddlers who'd never seen a real orange on a tree. I never turned anyone away. One Saturday in late September, I was up on the ladder picking the highest Valencias when I heard a familiar voice below. "Need a hand, Mr. Wheeler." I looked down. Sam Whitley, Greg Dana, Mrs. Velasquez, and about 20 others stood there with baskets and smiles. "We figured the old man shouldn't have to do harvest alone anymore," Greg said, already climbing the next tree like he was 25 again. I started to protest, but my throat closed up, so I just nodded and kept picking. We filled 3 pickup beds that day. When the sun set, the porch was full of people eating oranges and telling stories. Someone brought a cake that read, "Still not HOA property, S 2008. I laughed until my eyes watered. Years slipped by like that. The lawsuit money rebuilt the irrigation system, paid for a proper gravel road, and bought a small tractor I named Evelyn. The rest went into a college fund I set up anonymously for any kid in the neighborhood who wanted to study agriculture or law. 2 of the Martin kids are in it now. Karen moved away. Nobody knows where and nobody asks. The pink blazer was never seen again. Some nights, I still sit on the porch with a bourbon and watch the moon rise over the trees. Scout's gone now, buried under the oldest lemon with full military honors and a belly rub, but a new pup, Scout 2, sleeps at my feet, ears twitching at ghosts only dogs can hear. I talk to Evelyn out loud these days. The neighbors are used to it. I tell her about the harvest, about the kids who climbed the same trees we once climbed, about how the orchard kept its promise, it stayed ours, but it learned how to share without surrendering. And every single time the wind answers through the leaves, soft and certain. I never lock the south gate anymore. I don't have to. The boundary is no longer drawn in steel or in law or even in memory. It's drawn in respect. It's drawn in fruit picked and given freely. It's drawn in the laughter of children running between the rows, sticky with juice, and summer knowing exactly whose orchard this is, and exactly who it belongs to now. All of us.